It's this way.
Check. All right, good morning. We are glad to be back. We have an exciting artist to talk about today and some fun artwork to do. So happy Monday morning. We apologize for starting a little bit late. You know, we're sometimes slow on Monday mornings, and then that's just the way it is. Yep, hair's still wet. Not everybody's done here, but you know, we're here and we're gonna do art, and that's the great thing about it. So our artist today, I don't have a lot of big pieces of his artwork, which makes me really, really sad. Most of the art teaching supplies I inherited from an art teacher who was retiring. And since I haven't worked full-time in the schools, I haven't had the opportunity to build up my supply of artists that I'd like to show. And I'd like to show and teach about artists from many different backgrounds. And so we are going to talk about this artist today, even though I don't have big pieces of his work, but I am going to put some links to encourage you to go learn more about him. So our artist, can you not do that? It's kind of noisy in the background. Our artist today was probably the most well-known male African-American artist probably ever, which is amazing. Well known for a series he did when he was only 24, and this series had 60 small paintings in it, and it was all about the migration of the African-American people from the rural South up to the urban North around the time of World War I. Not a story that I was really familiar with at all, and this is one of the great things about art. When we expand and look at art made by a lot of different people from different backgrounds, we expand our world and we get to hear stories that we aren't really familiar with. And so this is one of the reasons it's really important to me to teach art not just created by white European males, which is really all I was taught in school. We need to hear more people's voices and from many, many different backgrounds, because we get to learn many different stories, and it really expands our world. So, sorry, back to our artist to see if you can guess who he is. African-American male artist, born in 1917, died in 2000. As I said, most famous for a huge series he did when he was only 24 years old about the Great Migration of the African Americans from the rural South to the urban North, called The Great Migration. His style, he called it dynamic Cubism, although it had a lot less to do, it was less influenced by the Cubist artists from France than it was from the colors and shapes of Harlem, where he lived, and the people around him and everything. So, any ideas who our artist is? In New Jersey, Atlantic City, New Jersey. Apparently we're still asleep. And but lived most of his life in New York, except later on he was asked to be an art professor in Seattle, Washington. That's where he passed away in 2000. He is known for being a painter, a storyteller, and an educator. So he chose, some people's art is just about art. Some people's art is about making it as beautiful as possible. His art was about telling a story. And that was the important thing about it, that he tell the story of the African-American people and try to help bring about change by making people more familiar with the trials and difficulties that they were experiencing. So he was a storyteller, which keep that in mind. Not sure what's happening over here, but keep that in mind, because our art project today, we are going to be storytellers. He said, when the subject is strong, remember his subject was the story of his people, the subject is strong, simplicity is the only way to treat it. So simplicity, what do we mean by simplicity? What does simplicity mean?
Simple.
Yeah.
And he lived to be 83.
So simplicity, keep it simple. His artwork is largely made up of like flat shapes. And what I mean by flat is that we're not doing shading to make them look 3D, kind of having solid colors. Most of the time, there isn't any texture in it. By texture, we mean, you know, fluffy, fuzzy curls or wood grain or, you know, bumpy rocks or anything like that. Most of the time, it's like a flat surface, a solid color. He's leaving out details of that texture and various things. A lot of times, his people don't even have eyes, nose, and mouths because simplicity. Like he said, when the subject is strong, simplicity is the only way to treat it. He didn't want to get worried about all those details. He wanted to more tell this story. And you didn't need all those details to tell the story. So I'm not sure how well I can show this. I do have a couple of pictures in my old, super heavy art history books. So this one down here, the computer's kind of far away from me. This one down here is one of his paintings. It's actually panel number 1 from his migration series. Where can you see his migration series today? Well, interestingly, it was so sought after that he split it up. You can see the odd numbered panels at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. You can see the even number panels at a museum in Philadelphia, which seems like kind of a funny way to do it. But the odd number ones went there, the even number ones went there. So you have to go to 2 different museums in 2 different states if you want to see all of them. Or you can look online and see a bunch of them. So that is one from that series. And you can see all these groups and groups of people in the train station. And interestingly, the first painting in the series had the people in the train station, and the last one, number 60, also had the people in the train station talking about how they were still migrating north. Like 6 million people migrated north around that time. Isn't that? It was partially because of the horrible racism in the South, facing just the atrocities, the lynchings and stuff, and the way they were treated. And while discrimination was still a thing they had to deal with in the North, there were better living conditions. There were all these huge factories had opened up, and there were many, many jobs. And so they migrated north. And he paints this in 60 panels. But talking about the fact that there still was discrimination that they had to deal with as they moved north, this painting shows that gold those gold bars, kind of the roped off, separating them. But he does a masterful way of leading your eye through this painting as you kind of like a what am I trying to say? A ball in a machine that you play. Pinball. Kind of pinball back and forth between the people as he leads your eye without a lot of details. Simplicity. The story, the subject is strong. So any questions about our artist? He really has a long painting career, spent like 60 years painting. He learned to paint when they were in New York, and his mom was working and needed to keep him busy somewhere. She signed him up for classes at Utopia Art Center, actually. And he started to learn to paint, and they saw his talent right away. Like I said, that migration series, he was only 24 when he did that, and suddenly was like hugely famous everywhere. So what we are going to focus on today is that simplicity of shapes, nice solid colors, not worrying about a lot of details, and we're going to tell a story. But I want you to tell, that's going to be more authentic. He was telling his people's story. And that's one of the great things about studying his art, is that we learn that story and get to hear that voice. So what about your voice? What's your story? And you might have lots of different stories inside of you. You can have your story right now of what right now, these videos are being taken during quarantine because of the coronavirus. So you have your story of what you're up to now, or you have your story of what your life was like before quarantine happened. If you look back at the tree, you have lots of different stories. My family tree is really diverse. I have my dad's side of my family is all Jewish, and most of them lived somewhere in Eastern Europe and Russia and migrated to the United States around the 1900s, a little bit before, a little bit after. Whereas on my mom's side, I have one line that got to the United States before the Mayflower. So they've been here forever. They're mostly Christian. The last few generations, they've been members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I have so many different stories in my family tree, and I bet you do too. Most of our family trees are made up of lots and lots of different stories. So think of a story. And that's what we're going to do today for our art project. And we're going to use collage because that helps us keep the shapes solid colors. So grab a piece of paper. Here you go, sir. Have you thought about what you want to tell? Hey, Goose, come on back. What story do you want to tell? We might have to think about it for a little while. I'm kind of putting him on the spot here. Think of a story that you would like to tell. It could be a story, like I said, of quarantine. It could be a story of your life before quarantine. Could be a fabulous family vacation. Could be your grandpa's story. Gonna have to give him a few more minutes. And this one, I'm not sure what's happening here. Her story is, Mom, let me go back to playing. So grab some colors. He used bright colors. Did you notice that from there? And again, and where you can see more of his work, he used bright colors. He had blacks and browns, and then these bright colors that really, really made it pop. So grab some of your construction paper. We got some here. A lot of it's a little bit faded, but we're going to do the best we can with what we have. And go ahead and just cut out shapes. Don't worry about all the details on your people. You don't need facial features. But, if you want, you can have them. Cut out your people. Cut out clothes to put on your people. It's kind of like we're working with paper dolls here. Put clothes on those people, all right? Unless, I guess that's part of your story.
Unless you're Lucy.
Unless you're Lucy, our youngest, who does still like to streak through the house. So cut out your shapes and then glue them together. And collage, your different shapes don't have to be right next to each other. They can overlap. In his paintings, again, look at how much overlapping there is. They're just people on top of people on top of people to give the feeling of so much in a small space. So overlap those shapes as you glue them down, and then share your story that you created through art. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Jacob Lawrence, our artist of the day, storytelling through painting, and thank you for joining us. So hope you have a fantastic day. Happy arting. I look forward to hearing your story and hope that you take the opportunity to listen to lots and lots of other people's stories and expand your world, as we were talking about earlier. Thank you. Hey, you can back.